This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, I'm Talia.
And I'm Tanya.
And together we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Talia.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey, everyone.
Are you ready for this episode?
Yes, I can't wait.
This episode is about the brutal deaths of 5 people, but it all starts with 19-year-old Rachel Timmerman's story. Rachel Timmerman was terrified as she sat next to 43-year-old Marvin Gabrion in his convertible on a dark 2-track road in the middle of a dense forest in Cedar Springs, Michigan. Cedar Springs is a rural area. She thought to herself, how did I get in this precarious situation, and how am I going to get out of here alive? Marvin seemed dead set on having his way with her at any cost. Earlier that evening, Rachel had this itch to go out and party. She had given birth 6 weeks earlier to a baby girl named Shannon, and she really just wanted to go out and have some fun. Her friend Wayne Davis, he called her up, and he invited her to play cards with him and a friend of his at his friend's trailer. They were going to play cards around 9 p.m., and this is August 6th of 1996. Rachel and Wayne had an unlikely friendship as he was 36 years older than her, and he was a disabled Vietnam vet. He lived on Social Security, disability benefits, because he had this metal plate in his head. He walked with a limp, and he had PTSD. He'd seen some real combat. Wayne lived in this rundown trailer, and he would always host card games and have some beer and some weed. And he was just one of those guys that people just came over to his house and smoked weed, smoked cigarettes, drank beer, played cards, that kind of guy. An interesting thing about Wayne is he wouldn't be caught dead without his army jacket on. He often joked with people that that jacket was the only thing holding his broken body together. So on this August night, Rachel convinced her mother, Velda, and her younger sister, Sarah, to watch baby Shannon while she went over to Wayne's friend's trailer to play some cards. They were going to play pinochle. Not having a car of her own, Rachel took off on foot to walk the 1 mile. And when she got there, she saw Wayne, a few other guys. They were all sitting around the table, drinking, smoking, playing cards. She sat down, joined them, and a few minutes later, a man walked in holding 2 12-packs of beer. He was followed by a teen boy who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old. Rachel was unfamiliar with the two, but she was soon introduced to Marvin Gabrion and his nephew, Mikey. This chance acquaintance set in motion a chain of events that would destroy the lives of numerous innocent people. For hours, everyone sat at the kitchen table, just getting drunk, smoking weed, playing pinochle. As the night went on, the pleasant mood turned really sinister. You know what happens when you got a bunch of men getting shit-faced. There's always one asshole in the group, right? Am I right?
Somebody that's had a little too much.
Gonna
start some shit.
Yes, thank you. Gonna start some shit. Well, that guy was Marvin. Wayne made just an off-cuff comment about Marvin being wasted, and it really pissed Marvin off. He got in Wayne's face, threatening him, calling him a motherfucker, and he grabbed him by the throat. After a few minutes, everything calmed back down, but the party atmosphere was sort of fizzling out. And Rachel concluded that it was time for her to head back home. By this time, the night sky was just pitch black, and Wayne didn't think it was safe for Rachel to walk home alone, so he joined her. As they started walking down the road, Marvin and Mikey pulled up to them in Marvin's new convertible and offered them a ride, which they accepted. Wayne hopped in the back seat, and Marvin instructed Mikey to do the same. Rachel sat in the front passenger side for what was supposed to be less than a 3-minute drive. But as Marvin pulled up to Rachel's home, he announced that he wasn't quite ready to drop her off. He said, I'm going to take you guys for a ride for a little bit. And Rachel protested, but he didn't really care what she had to say. And Wayne's just shit-faced in the back. And Mikey is too, even though he's only 14. Against Rachel's wishes, he kept driving and he turned down a dirt road into the forest. An uneasy feeling took over Rachel, but she kept assuring herself that as long as Wayne and Mikey were in the back seat, nothing too bad could happen to her. Then Marvin abruptly stopped the car and ordered Mikey and Wayne to, quote, get the fuck out. Mikey protested, saying, I don't even know where I'm at. I have no idea how to get back home. I don't want to get out. And Marvin warned Mikey if he didn't get out right then and there, he was going to beat his ass. So Mikey got out. Wayne was extremely inebriated, and he didn't fully comprehend what was going on, so he just kind of stumbled out of the convertible and started walking with Mikey. Marvin turned to Rachel and said, you're going to stay. And Rachel didn't know exactly what to do. And keep in mind, she's pretty buzzed too. Marvin slowly drove deeper and deeper into the trees until he found a spot so secluded that no one would be able to hear Rachel's screams. He then forced himself on her, grabbed her by the throat, saying that she'd been begging for him to fuck her all night. And this was when Rachel realized her life was truly in danger. He forced her out of the car, and Rachel fought back as he repeatedly punched her in the face and pounded her head into the ground. During the struggle, he bit her nose.
What?
He bit her nose. He bit it so hard that the cartilage broke,
Ooh.
causing her sinuses to fill with blood. Eventually, he overpowered her, and defeated, Rachel just laid there while he raped her. When he was finally finished, he sat there naked in the woods, taunting Rachel, asking her if she liked his 6 inches of marvelous.
Ugh.
Then he raped her again. When he was done, he allowed Rachel to put her clothes back on and warned her that if she told anyone what happened, he would kill her baby Shannon, and make her watch as he did it, and then he would kill her.
Jeez.
Marvin forced Rachel to walk with him down this path. He thought this path would lead to a river, and he wanted Rachel to cleanse herself of the evidence in the river. But with only the moonlight guiding them, Marvin couldn't find the river, and he became really frustrated. He threw Rachel down on the ground, he forced her clothes off her again, and he violently raped her for the 3rd time that night. Sure she was going to die if she didn't do something, Rachel came up with a plan. During the 3rd rape, she told Marvin that she didn't like doing it in the dirt and suggested that maybe they could go back to her house and they continue having the sex in the comforts of her bed. And Marvin made some comments like, oh, you do like it rough, and, you know, he's such an ass.
Gross.
And to her surprise, he fell for it.
He did?
He fell for it. He thought she must have just absolutely loved to be beaten and raped in the dirt. Together, they walked back to his convertible, and he drove her home. While Marvin was slowly pulling into her driveway, it was really steep, so he had to go really slow. Rachel opened the passenger door and jumped out, ran to her mom's trailer's front door, and by the grace of God, it was unlocked. She ran through the kitchen, and she was surprised to see Wayne and Mikey passed out at the table.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they
made it there.
And Mikey, she didn't even know Mikey before, but
Right.
He must have just went with Wayne, and they were there, passed out at the kitchen table. As Rachel's running through the trailer, she started screaming, "Don't let Marvin in! Don't let Marvin in!" And she raced into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. Under the bathroom sink, there was an old hammer, and she quickly grabbed that to defend herself. Through the bathroom door, she could hear Marvin's voice talking to Wayne and Mikey in the kitchen, so she knows that Marvin got in. And in Wayne and Mikey's defense, they're probably like, what the hell is going on? Rachel started screaming for Marvin to get out, but Marvin didn't. He approached the bathroom and he tried opening the door. Wayne came to his senses and he began yelling to Marvin, just get out, just leave. The scene was total chaos, and the commotion ended up waking Rachel's mom and her sister, and they ran out of their bedrooms to see what the hell was going on. Rachel leaves the bathroom with this hammer in her hand, and she screams, just everybody get out of here, I'm going to call the cops. Marvin backed off, and he warned her, if you call the police, You're going to really regret it. By 3:30 in the morning, all the men had left, and Rachel was alone with her mom, her sister Sarah, and baby Shannon in the trailer. The next morning, Rachel was encouraged by her mom and sister to report the rape. But she told her mom, I'm so terrified of this man, I really don't want to. But in the end, she was convinced to call the authorities, and she was taken to the hospital to have a rape kit performed. At the hospital, they found vaginal bruising and semen was collected. Pictures of Rachel's injuries were documented with her broken nose. Now, Marvin was well known to the Newaygo County Sheriff's Department. That's where Cedar Springs is Newaygo County, because he had numerous run-ins with the law. He had multiple DUIs, assault convictions, plus a robbery under his belt. Detective Sergeant Dave Babcock, he was put on the case, and he went to go get a statement from Marvin about his side of the story, but Marvin was nowhere to be found. Now, this is really strange. A week later, Detective Babcock receives a fax from a grocery store in the nearby city of Grand Rapids. It was from Marvin, and he wanted to say his side of the story.
In a fax.
And I can't wait to read you this fax. According to the letter that he faxed over, Rachel had tried to seduce him on the night of the rape. She desperately wanted to have intercourse with him, but he refused her because he didn't have a condom and he was afraid that he was going to get her pregnant. However, he did allow her to perform oral sex on him, and she let him come in her mouth. But right before his eyes, she played a trick on him. Before she swallowed his semen, she placed her fingers in her mouth and swished the semen around the fingers and then inserted them in her vagina. Marvin claims there was no rape, but an elaborate setup by Rachel to get back at him for denying her sexual desires.
Really?
Yes.
Wow, what a story.
I don't know how stupid you have to be to think someone's going to believe that. So dumb.
It is.
Anyway, the prosecutors didn't immediately charge Marvin with a crime, and Rachel was left trying to deal with the emotional scars of that awful August night and the fear that Marvin would retaliate against her for contacting the police. She began allowing baby Shannon's father, whom she'd only briefly dated before she found out she was pregnant, she began allowing him to take Shannon overnights on the weekends. He lived with his parents, and he was only 18 years old too. She was just trying to deal with her life and get her life together. Months went by and the prosecutor still hadn't filed rape charges against Marvin. However, Rachel ended up in jail. Back in the spring, a few months before the rape, she'd gotten arrested for selling weed to some people, and she was put on zero tolerance probation. So a few months after the rape, someone reported to her probation officer that Rachel was drinking and throwing wild parties. So her probation officer did a surprise home visit, and he found some liquor bottles on top of the garbage. As a result, she received a probation violation and was ordered to serve 5 months in jail. So Rachel is going to jail.
Unbelievable.
But Marvin is out. Rachel had to report to jail on January 11th in 1997. A few days after she went to jail, the prosecutor finally filed an arrest warrant for Marvin on charges of rape. The arrest warrant contained the names of 3 witnesses that were subpoenaed for the trial: Rachel, Wayne Davis, and Marvin's nephew, Mikey. Ironically, Marvin was arrested and placed in the same county jail as Rachel. A trial date was set for June 5th, and only Rachel, Wayne Davis, and Mikey stood between Marvin and an acquittal. And he was not going to allow himself to be convicted of rape. The judge set his bond at $75,000, and 2 weeks later, his mom posted the bond. This allowed Marvin to be released, and he didn't waste any time putting a plan in place that would lead to the horrific murders of multiple people, and I mean horrible murders. Less than a week after Marvin's release on bond, a friend of Wayne Davis's named Darlene, she went to Wayne's trailer just to say hi, and she saw him there with Marvin working on a car in the driveway, just like fixing up a car. Wayne asked Darlene if she wouldn't mind picking him up the next morning and giving him a ride to jail, because he had to report to jail for a 90-day sentence for DUI he received months earlier. It's a very busy Nuevo County jail. It's very busy. The next morning, Darlene showed up, but Wayne wasn't there. Left behind on his kitchen chair was the army jacket that he cherished and always wore. All of his other personal effects in the house, they were in place. It didn't look like anything had been touched, but his stereo equipment was missing. A few weeks after his disappearance, Marvin tried to sell Wayne's stereo equipment at a local consignment shop with the serial numbers ground off. But none of this was investigated because the authorities believed Wayne had absconded.
Really?
In lieu of doing the 90 days in jail.
Really?
It would be years before anyone learned the horrible fate that became this disabled vet, which I'll circle around to at the end. Rachel took advantage of her time in jail. She got her GED. Her 19th birthday was spent in jail, and that was obviously a bum birthday. Baby Shannon was brought to visit her frequently, and Rachel was really determined to straighten out her life. But while she was in jail, she got continuously reminded of the situation with Marvin. She received a letter supposedly from Marvin's mother stating that she needed to recant her story. Ominously, it also inquired about baby Shannon, asking details of her life, where she was at, when she slept, when she ate, which is really strange.
Mm-hmm.
On May 5th, Rachel was released from jail. She thought it would be best to stay at her father Tim's home instead of going back to her mother's trailer. Her father had a really nice house. He had a pool, he had a stable environment for baby Shannon, and baby Shannon was going to be transitioned back into Rachel's custody. Not long after her release, Marvin began what Rachel described to others as stalking her. He approached her on at least 2 occasions. On the first occasion, he threatened her life if she didn't drop the charges against him. And by the way, I don't even think she could drop the charges.
I don't think so either. I think once the prosecutor makes the file, I don't think you can.
But if she doesn't testify, I suppose there wouldn't be much of a case.
Right, that's true.
Another time, he told her the names of her family members. He said, I know where they live. I know where they work. I know what cars they drive. And he warned her that she better not show up for court next month or her family would be harmed. After both incidences, Rachel called the sheriff's office and she was just in a panic. She was so scared for her life. But they didn't do anything about it, even though that's clearly witness intimidation. Nothing was done. Not long after Rachel settled into her dad's house, boys began calling the home asking for Rachel. There was one boy in particular who was an acquaintance of Rachel's. His name was John Weeks. He began calling more than the others, and he repeatedly asked Rachel out on a date until she eventually agreed to go. On June 3rd, 2 days before she was set to testify against Marvin, Rachel told her dad that she was going to go out on a dinner date with this guy named John, and that Shannon would be coming with her at his request.
Really?
She promised it would only be a dinner date and that she'd be home in a few hours. A vehicle awaited for her at the end of Rachel's father's driveway, and Rachel gathered up baby Shannon, the diaper bag, the car seat, and she headed down to the end of the driveway. And it was kind of a long driveway. Rachel had no idea that John Weeks was a friend of Marvin's, and she was falling into a deadly trap. Rachel and baby Shannon, they never returned home that night. Given Rachel's somewhat precarious behavior in the past, her father and her stepmom, they weren't overly concerned. They didn't like it, but Rachel had just started living with them. She just got out of jail, and she didn't have a history of being completely stable. So they weren't that concerned. However, the very next day, literally the very next day, an envelope arrived addressed to Rachel's father, Tim, in his mailbox. It was postmarked from Cedar Rapids, Michigan, and the return address on the label said, on vacation. There was a hologram image of the space station. That was the stamp that was on the letter. And when the dad opened the envelope up, he saw inside it a handwritten letter from Rachel. This is what the letter said. Dad, I'm sorry I left without saying goodbye. That guy who picked me up is like the man of my dreams. Shannon bonded with him so well, and so did I. Right now, we're on vacation. Maybe we might get eloped. He already asked me to marry him. I'll be gone for a couple weeks. I would call you on the phone, but I think you'd try to talk me out of the marriage. I'll write more letters and send you an address when I get one. Love, Rachel.
Yeah.
Her family didn't know what to think about that. It didn't make sense to them. But again, Rachel was young and she'd made some bad choices. So they didn't immediately think she was in danger. When the next day came and there was no Rachel and no Shannon, the family grew a bit more concerned because that was the date of Marvin's rape trial. And Rachel never showed up.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It was on June 15th when Rachel and Shannon's family really started to panic. Not only was that Father's Day, but it was also Shannon's first birthday, and Rachel hadn't come home or called. Baby Shannon's paternal family, they were extremely upset, and they reached out to the police repeatedly. They'd been told that Rachel eloped, and they were very upset because they'd been seeing Shannon and taking care of her, and now she's just
disappeared,
gone. She's
right.
just gone. But authorities didn't take their concerns very seriously. But the very next day, Detective Babcock visited Tim's house, Rachel's dad's house, and he brought with him a handwritten letter that the Newaygo County prosecutor had received earlier that day from Rachel.
Really? Now she's writing to the prosecutor.
The envelope was postmarked from Little Rock, Arkansas, with the return address being Rachel's father's house. It had the same holographic space station stamp as the one Rachel's father had received a week and a half earlier. When Tim looked at the letter, he immediately recognized that it was Rachel's handwriting, and his heart just sank. Here's what the letter to the prosecutor said. Dear prosecutor, I'm writing you in hopes that you won't press charges on me for falsifying a police report. Marvin Gabrion did not rape me. I was mad at him because he called my mother and sisters prostitutes at a card party. A short time later, we made up. Then we went down by the river where I performed oral sex on him. When he wouldn't have intercourse with me, I decided to teach him a lesson. The final straw was when his puppy bit me on the nose. I pushed the cum from him up on my vagina. I then pinched myself there so I'd be bruised. I am madly in love with an honest Christian man, and I can't bear the thought of trying to lock up an innocent man. Thank you, Rachel Timmerman. End quote. That's in her handwriting.
I don't even know what to say. Jesus.
Something bad's going on with
Something
Rachel.
really bad.
Later that same day, Tim received a letter in the mail. It was a handwritten letter from Rachel, and I think in it she knew what her fate would be, and I think she gave a few subtle clues. I'll read the letter to you. Dear Dad, hello, how are you? I'm fine. Delbert just got a job in Little Rock, Arkansas. All the people are so nice here. I'm considering living here forever. Shannon is doing great. She misses you guys, but she's adjusting to life out here really well. I don't know for sure when I'll be home, but we will at least come to visit in the near future. I'm pretty sure you and Delbert will get along. He's a really good guy. When I decide what I'm doing for the future, I'll write you back and let you know. Pass on my love to the others and tell them I'll miss them until I see them again. Love you loads. Love, Rachel. End quote. So here's where I think the subtle clue is. Who's Delbert?
That's what I was just going to ask.
She
Who's
told
Delbert?
her dad she was going out with
John.
with a guy named John.
Who's Delbert?
That's why I think it's a subtle clue that she's letting her dad know maybe she's not
Yeah.
with the guy she claimed she would be with. This part really pisses me off. As a result of Rachel missing the rape trial and the handwritten letter that the prosecutor received, the prosecutor had no other choice but to formally dismiss the rape charges against Marvin, which, I mean, I understand why, but pisses me off.
He got what he wanted.
Yes. Weeks went by with no sightings of Rachel and baby Shannon. No more letters were received. Then, on July 5th, a month after the two had disappeared, a man decided to go turtle trapping at a very small, remote spot known as Oxford Lake, which is located in the Manistee National Forest on federal land in Newaygo County. To get to the water, he had to walk through muck and mud, and the water itself, even though it's Oxford Lake, don't think of it as a lake. Think of it as a disgusting swamp.
Okay.
That is how I would think about it. It is filled with seaweed and algae. So this guy, he drops 3 boxes filled with chicken heads and chicken necks into the shoreline cattails. And as he's doing it, he notices something floating that looks like a dead animal or a really big beach ball. He hopped in his small boat and he paddled closer to it. As he grew nearer, he saw blonde hair filled with algae and a human body just covered with sea life. He started vomiting and he paddled back to the shore.
Yeah, imagine finding that. You're just there to do a little
turtle
hunting.
Why you say it like that?
I know.
Turtle hunting.
Little turtle
now
hunting.
She's got a new accent she's using.
And you come across a dead body. And you're by yourself.
Nightmare.
Right? I would have thrown up too.
Oh, yeah. I would have thrown up just being at the lake itself, for the record. This fisherman, he didn't have a phone, so he had to drive to the sheriff's department, and on his way, he ran out of gas.
Oh, my God.
Meanwhile, another man, his name is Douglas. He owned a small cabin on Oxford Lake. He was from Chicago, but he really wanted to get away sometimes into the middle of nothing, which is why you go to Oxford Lake. He and his son-in-law, his name was Nathan, they were preparing to launch a small fishing boat from a ramp in the water when they saw an object floating about 100 yards offshore. They looked at the object through binoculars, and they thought it looked like a human torso. So they decided to get in their little boat and check it out. The weeds were so thick between the ramp and the floating object that they had to actually row south and then row around it, just to give you an idea of how nasty the water is. As they came close, they saw feet protruding from the water and blonde hair laden with algae. Desperate to believe it was anything other than a body, Douglas turned to his son-in-law and said, quote, "Maybe it's a dummy of some kind." But then the odor hit them, and they realized without a doubt it was a human dead body. The fully clothed body was face up, and this is so sad. There was a concrete block attached to the front near the waistline. The body's leg and waist were tightly bound with a shiny metal chain and 2 padlocks, and the concrete block was attached to the chain. There was a second concrete block also attached to the body through the chains that wrapped around the legs, and that was secured with metal clips. The corpse's wrists were handcuffed tightly behind its back, and duct tape held a gag in place and also covered the eyes. The water in Oxford Lake, it's only 3 feet deep, but there's 82 feet of soft muck beneath. Is that not the sickest thing?
I know.
82 feet of soft muck. 1/3 of the body was covered in muck, and it only had reached the surface as a result of bacterial gassing from decomposition that had set in. Cross tattoo on the hand, coupled with dental records, later confirmed that the body was that of 19-year-old Rachel Timmerman. An autopsy determined that Rachel was thrown into the water alive, and her cause of death was drowning.
I can't imagine how terrifying that was for her.
The thing is, she's thrown in water, but she's actually really thrown in muck.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. It's so upsetting, but I shall move on. Through the next few days, divers searched the lake on multiple occasions, but when you have just a couple feet of water and 60 to 80 feet of muck, it's almost impossible to find anything sunken at the bottom. Baby Shannon wasn't found, and her disappearance remained a mystery. Further investigation determined that Rachel was dumped in the water 227 feet off the mark that separates the state and the federal property, with her death occurring on federal property, because in Manistee National Forest is federal land. So they determined she was murdered on federal land, which is significant because the state of Michigan does not have the death sentence, but federal jurisdiction does. As a result, the FBI was brought in to investigate the murder. Of course, they were very interested in talking to John Weeks and Marvin Gabrion, but neither man could be found. They made contact with John Weeks' girlfriend, and she had some pretty interesting information to share with them. John had helped Marvin out sometimes. He did odd jobs, making some money on the side, just kind of being a handyman for Marvin. Why Marvin needs a handyman, I don't know, because he doesn't even have a real career. I don't even know what the guy does. I think he's just a full-time loser. But most of the time, John Weeks worked at his family's junkyard. Now, John's girlfriend had caught John talking on the phone, asking Rachel out on a date. When she confronted him about this, he told her he was doing it as a favor for Marvin. Even more interesting was that John has been missing for weeks at that point. He told his girlfriend that he was going to go do a drug run to Arizona with Marvin, but only Marvin returned. When she asked Marvin what happened to John, he said, well, John wanted me to leave him at some friend's house that he had in Arizona, so I just left him there. She didn't know of any friends he had in Arizona. And authorities doubt that John and Marvin ever went to Arizona, especially considering that some of Rachel's letters were postmarked from Arkansas. So now John Weeks is missing. Baby Shannon's still missing. Rachel's dead. Wayne Davis is missing. As news of Rachel's body being recovered hit the media, witnesses began coming forward. One of them was named Bonnie Robinson, and she reported that around the time of Rachel's abduction, Bonnie was driving away from a farm that she lived on near Oxford Lake. As she approached this one-lane bridge, she encountered an old pickup truck driving fast the other way, towards the lake. Inside the truck were two men with a large blonde woman, a description that matches Rachel. Rachel was a little bit heavyset. The woman was sitting between the two men, and the driver seemed very angry about something. And his truck had a small metal boat that it was pulling. Now, Kathy Kirk similarly stated that she and her mother had parked at Oxford Lake near the mud ramp when they saw the same pickup truck with a boat sticking out of the back pull up alongside them. She later identified the driver as Marvin, and there was a young blonde woman, who was later identified as Rachel, sitting between him and another man, obviously John Weeks. Twice the blonde woman looked up at Kathy and then looked down again. Having no idea of the gravity of the situation, Kathy and her mother, they just drove off. They didn't know.
Right.
Finally, again, on June 4th, the date after Rachel disappeared, Pearl and Bob Hall, they were driving along a narrow two-track road towards Oxford Lake. As they got near the lake, an old pickup truck with a boat sticking out came fast the other way. This time Marvin was driving alone, and he looked really mad. He was glaring. That's what they described. The reason why this incident stuck out in their mind was because they had to pull over into some bushes to avoid hitting him. A day or two later, Marvin and John Weeks approached several campers at a campground near Oxford Lake. Marvin introduced himself as Lance, which was an alias he frequently used. I don't know why he needs an alias. Do you have an alias?
No, I don't.
I don't. He asked if he could store his boat at the other campers' campsite, explaining that the site he was at was too crowded to keep his boat there. They said Marvin appeared skittish, he was nervous, and he was wearing gloves, even though it's June. And in Michigan, that's a warm day. But they agreed to let him put his boat there. Later, the campers stumbled upon Marvin and John's campsite while they were looking for firewood. And Marvin was standing by the fire wearing gloves. And they noticed he had plenty of room to put the boat. So they thought that was just really odd, and that's why that stuck in their head. Around 3:30 a.m. on June 6th, so this is 3 days after Rachel and Shannon disappeared, one of Marvin's neighbors in town, he awoke to the sound of a very loud bang. He looked out the window and he saw Marvin dragging this metal boat onto his gravel driveway. He had obvious bruises and scratches on his face. Once Marvin got the boat inside the garage, his neighbor saw him remove 2 life vests, 3 concrete blocks, and a length of shiny chain. Then Marvin pulled the boat into the garage and he kept the door open so the neighbor could see he was grinding off the boat's registration numbers.
Because that's not suspicious.
Not at all. The FBI executed a search warrant at his residence. Now, Marvin lived in Altona, Michigan. It's just a few minutes away from Cedar Springs. It's just another tiny town, very rural. These are all very rural, small towns. He had an apartment above a Christian bookstore.
The irony.
Right? Now, this is really important. This bookstore had been purchased a year prior by a man named Robert Allen. So remember, Robert Allen. Now, Marvin's apartment, he had American flags duct taped to the window instead of curtains.
Classy.
Not even just hanging. No, duct taped.
Duct taped.
When they searched this place, they found 2 keys that fit the padlocks on the chains on Rachel's body. They found some hologram space station stamps. In the backyard, they found these concrete blocks, and these blocks were stained with the same tar and this pink paint, which the blocks that were attached to Rachel's body. So it was clear that the blocks on Rachel's body belonged to Marvin. Marvin's nephew, Mikey, he came forward. Poor Mikey.
I know.
Poor Mikey.
I've been wondering about him.
Poor Mikey. He led sheriff deputies to a campsite that he and his uncle frequently used. The site was north of Oxford Lake, down a 2-track in a dense, remote area. When they got there, they found Marvin's tent was still pitched there. Scattered about were bolt cutters, another length of shiny chain, duct tape, a woman's hair clip, and silicone nipples for a baby bottle.
Oh, no.
As the police and the FBI dug deeper into Marvin's background, they came across even more disturbing information that led them to believe that Marvin may well be a serial killer.
Really?
But before I tell you, we're going to take a quick break. Keep in mind, the FBI are only piecing together Wayne Davis's disappearance. They've just discovered John Weeks is disappeared. They found Rachel's body, but all the authorities thought she just ran away. So now they're finding out there's a lot of people missing. And even more interesting is they found out that the man who owned the Christian bookstore where Marvin lived above, Robert Allen, he too went missing over a year earlier. In 1995, Robert Allen was a mentally disabled alcoholic who lived in this tiny one-room apartment south of Cedar Rapids in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Weeks before his disappearance, he started hanging out with a man he introduced his friends to as Marv. Then one day, Robert was just gone. He just disappeared. His friends never saw him again. However, someone using Robert's ID opened up a bank account, took all the money from Robert's bank account, and bought a Christian bookstore in Robert's name where Marvin happened to be able to live rent-free in. In addition, someone continued cashing his Social Security checks. The FBI, they were able to trace his Social Security checks to a P.O. box in Sherman, New York. They also found that Robert Allen had a checking account in nearby Jamestown, too. So he had one in Michigan that he opened since he was missing. He had one in Jamestown. He's purchasing buildings, and yet he's just gone. In October, 3 months after Rachel, her body had been found, the FBI staked out this post office. And around 11:30, Marvin showed up to pick up one of Robert's checks, and the FBI finally caught up with this asshole. And in case you weren't completely convinced Marvin is psychotic, wait till I tell you what happens after his arrest. This story just gets even more insane. As Marvin is in jail waiting trial, he decides to write a letter to Rachel's family.
Oh, Jesus.
He wrote a letter to her father, Tim. And I'm going to read you just a really small portion of the many, many letters he wrote to Rachel's family. Are you ready for this?
Oh, I can't wait.
Hi, I'm trying to start a nonprofit organization called, quote, No More Missing Children, end quote, and would like to use baby Shannon as the poster child. People will realize someday this way that I'm not a monster. I've always been really disturbed when I see these missing children flyers. Once we get these missing person flyers of Shannon up and on the internet, it will snowball in finding her. Please pray and accept help from others, end quote.
What an asshole. He is psychopath.
He sends so many more letters about this nonprofit organization he wants to start called No More Missing Children.
And the poster child's going to be a baby he killed. Well, I don't know for sure if he killed her or not.
Right.
But
in another letter Marvin wrote to Tim, he wrote, quote, Tim, I'm very saddened by your lack of hope. Please look at the facts. The police thoroughly searched the lake and the area for Shannon. I pray Shannon is happy and healthy, which she most likely is. Upper middle class or rich people are usually the recipients of these missing babies. Please let me help you find her. To make Shannon the poster child for my, quote, no more missing children, end quote, nonprofit organization, I need your permission. Then he repeatedly asks Tim for a photo of Shannon to be sent to him.
Oh, I am so disgusted.
He wrote so many of these letters, Tanya. He wrote a letter to Rachel's younger sister, Sarah, and her mother, basically saying the same things. He wrote more letters, and then eventually Tim wrote him back, pleading with him to tell him where Shannon was. And in the letter, he included a photo of Shannon, hoping it might trigger Marvin to have some sort of soul or conscience and come forward and tell him where they could find her. According to court records, and I have no idea how the court knows this, but Marvin masturbated to her picture. He used it for sexual gratification.
Oh, my God. What a scumbag.
He was found guilty of Social Security fraud in the case involving Robert Allen's stolen identity, but there was never enough evidence to try him for the murder. And to this day, Robert Allen's body has never been found. It wasn't until 2002 that Marvin's trial for the murder of Rachel started. The prosecutor's opening argument laid out the events as they believe occurred on the night Rachel was abducted. So John Weeks picks her up and baby Shannon, and unbeknownst to Rachel, instead of going out to dinner, she's taken to a prearranged location to meet Marvin. The prosecutors theorized that Marvin did something with Shannon immediately, like maybe even had one of his friends, because he had some shady friends, babysit Shannon for a little bit. And I don't know what leads them to that, but that's their theory. And then Marvin got Rachel to pretty much cooperate with him by holding Shannon hostage, threatening to harm Shannon. So baby Shannon is being watched by somebody. And then John Weeks and Marvin take Rachel to the campsite and they have her write these letters. As soon as she writes the first letter, Marvin takes off and he mails it immediately. He must have, because the letter ended up making it to her dad's house the very next day. Clearly, Rachel knew her life was in imminent danger. No one knows why John went along with this. Perhaps he was afraid of Marvin, because Marvin, there's so much I didn't tell you about Marvin, but he just has a history of being volatile and violent. Others suspect that John may have owed him money for drugs, and this was a way he could pay off his debt. So they have Rachel, they have her at the campsite. Later, when it was dark, Marvin placed two 30-pound cement blocks on the small boat, along with the chains and the padlocks. He duct-taped Rachel's eyes, he gagged her, and he placed those handcuffs on her wrist behind her back. But he put the boat in the water, just barely, and he forced Rachel to lay at the bottom of the boat. Then he put on a life jacket. John Weeks put on a life jacket. They paddled out in the dark. Rachel was thrown alive into 2 feet deep water with 63 pounds of concrete on her body, forcing her body to sink into the nasty, mucky water below. She remained there for a month until her body resurfaced. So at the trial, Marvin's former cellmate testified that Marvin told him he murdered baby Shannon because, quote, there was nothing else to do with it, end quote. In addition, this is very interesting, a map made by Marvin while he was in jail was introduced into evidence. Like, people, when you're in jail, don't write things down. I mean, don't talk on the phone and say things, admit crimes you've done, because guess what?
Everything's recorded.
It's all recorded. You write stuff, they're going to get it. Anyway, he made a map, and the map was a map of Oxford Lake.
Oh.
There were 3 X's placed in the lake. Next to one of the X's, it says, quote, body found. Below it, it says 1 of 3.
Ew. Really?
Which leads authorities to believe that there are 2 more bodies in Oxford Lake. Whose bodies are they?
John,
Robert, Shannon, Wayne.
Wayne.
I'll tell you who I think at the end.
Okay.
Of course, Marvin took the stand.
Of course he did, because he didn't do this to Leah.
He didn't rape her.
He didn't rape her.
He
She
didn't
wanted
kill her.
it. Number one. She's setting him up. Unbelievable.
He tells the jury that he was A, framed by the police.
Yep.
B, her father killed her.
Really?
By the time he was done testifying, he blamed 12 other people for her death.
Are you kidding me?
He said she was a prostitute and her pimp named Eddie did it. He had so many different theories. I have to tell you this story. And this is such a sad story that this part will make you laugh.
Okay.
Are you ready for this? You guys better buckle up for this one. This is totally 100% true. At the trial, a deputy took the stand to describe an incident that occurred before the murder with Marvin. The deputy had gone to Marvin's apartment because someone had reported that Marvin had been threatening them earlier. So the deputy knocks on the door. He goes inside. When he does, he sees a large bullfrog laying on its back, spread eagle, fastened to a mattress. There was dried and wet bodily fluids on it. It appeared to the deputy that Marvin had attempted to have sexual relations with the bullfrog.
What? What?
I don't think I need to say that again.
What?
I think that was very clear. It's true.
I
had to Google bullfrog to see
God.
what the hell that could possibly be. I'm still a little confused. It's true.
He's got this bullfrog tied down on a mattress?
It just says fastened.
What the fuck?
I don't know how he fastened it. But they were wet and dried. So there's wet bodily fluid.
Oh my God. What the heck?
I know.
I don't want to think about this anymore. What the hell? I am
almost
so
done.
disturbed. This whole story was disturbing. I'm just...
I
And
know.
the
I have to laugh
bullfrog.
because I can't cope. I
Was
can't cope with
Was
this.
the bullfrog still alive? Do you know?
Seriously? I don't know if the bullfrog... Really? I don't know. It didn't say.
Oh my God.
I don't think
Oh my
so.
God. I don't think so either. That poor thing. Wow. Okay. All right.
Let's move on.
I'm composing myself.
Get it together.
What's the matter with people?
I don't know. The jury found Marvin guilty
Thank God.
of Rachel's murder and sentenced him to death. He was so pissed off when he found out in court that he punched his attorney in the face.
Oh my God.
And then he later contended that should have been grounds for a mistrial.
The punch?
The punch.
Okay.
He filed numerous appeals and proclaims to this day that he's innocent. As a matter of fact, he's got documents out there that I found online talking about and how innocent he is and how it's so awful. I'm not going to even read any of it. It's stupid.
He's just been railroaded by the system.
Yes, and how Rachel's mom probably did it or her dad and the conspiracy theories and blah, blah, blah.
Or her pimp,
Yes, Eddie. Which she didn't have a pimp. I don't even know who Eddie is.
Yeah, he's just making bullshit up.
So this is really interesting. 5 years to the day that Rachel's body arose to the surface of Oxford Lake, there was a surprise development in the case. 2 people were canoeing in Manistee National Forest, and they were in a lake adjacent to Oxford Lake. While they were canoeing, they discovered a body, later identified as Rachel's friend Wayne Davis.
Aw.
He'd been handcuffed behind his back and had chains and cinder blocks attached to his body.
Really?
The medical examiner concluded that he'd been dead for years and that based on the evidence, Wayne, like Rachel, was most likely thrown alive into the lake and sank into the muck. Although authorities believe Marvin was responsible for his murder, he's never been charged in that case. Baby Shannon has never been found, and although her family holds out hope that she's alive, the prosecutor at the trial argued that she was dead. And most people believe that one of the X's marked on that map that he drew of Oxford Lake is Shannon's body. John Weeks has never been seen or heard from since 1997. Police believe that he is not on the run, but that he is dead. And that's the story.
Damn.
There's a lot to take in.
There's a lot to unpack there. My God, what a story. Jesus. He is nuts. He's beyond nuts.
Yeah, and his family, I believe, abandoned him because he has rants about them helping set him up, too.
His own family, like
His
the
own
mom
family.
who bailed him out?
Yes, I think they've all abandoned him.
Oh, jeez.
So that is the story of Rachel Timmerman. And I got a lot of my information from this book that Rachel's dad, he goes by Tim, but his name is Elsie Timmerman, and Rachel's uncle, John, they wrote a book called The Color of Night. And I think it was very cathartic for them. That's my guess. And so I got a lot of my information from there. And then this asshole, Marvin, Tanya, he wrote a 600-page appeal for himself.
He wrote it himself?
He wrote it himself. It was 600 pages. And the court responded with a 221-page opinion.
Wow.
So I read all that craziness, too. It's crazy. And that's where I got my info.
Well, thanks for that, Talia.
You're welcome. I want to give a shout out to our editor. His name is Joe, and Joe has this website, clovercrestmedia.com, and it's got over 30 different podcasts. You guys should go check it out. It's got podcasts on real estate, true crime, like us. We're there.
We're there.
Pop culture and more. And Joe edits audio. He's going to edit this. And he does video, voiceovers, TV commercial production, gaming, blogging. And he's just really good. We just love Joe.
We love Joe.
So check that out. And then also you can check out our Patreon. Everybody knows about our Patreon.
You can find it at patreon.com/TNTcrimes.
Or you can go to our website, tntcrimes.com. We've got some really good stories on Patreon.
We do.
I did one on Leslie Van Houten.
Oh, yeah, that one was good.
And Tanya did one on...
I've done a couple on serial killers that are really good.
Yeah, some of them are pretty graphic.
Yes.
And we swear a lot more. So you guys are all warned. If you go to Patreon, it's a lot more of us chit-chatting and more off the cuff. So I think that's it.
I think so.
You can go to our Instagram.
And Facebook.
Yeah, TNT Crimes Podcast. Anything else?
That'll do it, I think. So until next time.
Until next time, don't kill each other.
Bye.
Bye.